I acknowledge the traditional custodians of country throughout Australia and recognise their continuing connection to land, waters, and community. I pay my respects to them and their cultures and to elders both past and present. Hello, I'm Danielle Heckle and welcome to my practice framework. Today I'm going to explain my practice framework as a narrative because I feel narrative therapy, counselling, storytelling I really resonate with and is part of my practice framework. As you can tell, I have created a pond which represents my framework. The murky water in the pond represents who I am, my life experiences, and the personal values that I hold. The blooming lotus flower represents the learning that I've formed throughout my degree, the theories, the models, and the frameworks that I'll bring to my social work practice. The rocks on the side of my pond embody the skills and knowledge that I'll bring to my practice and explain why these are important. And the ground is what holds my pond together, and this represents the elements that will keep me accountable and grounded to my professional practice, because without these, there would be no pond. The theme of my framework is the growth of a lotus flower from the murky water every morning, unstained, is a sign of rebirth, symbolising one who performs their duty with a kind heart, without attachment, and I'll come back to this later on in my presentation. A little bit about who I am and what is in my murky pond water. My ancestors were convicts from England, and I'm a third generation Australian on my mum's side from Scotland. I grew up in a working class family. I have one older sister and two younger sisters. I have a brother who passed away when I was 10, and I'm currently 42 with a blended family, and my daughter's father passed away when she was 16 months old. He suffered from bipolar and substance use disorder. My perspectives and beliefs that I bring to my practice is that early childhood experiences are important to a person's development. A person's life is made up with many entwined systems. People grow and change throughout life, and a person is shaped by their social environment, experiences, and the relationships one creates. The values I hold in my pond are family, respect, compassion, flexibility, inclusiveness, empowerment, accountability, and integrity. The next part of my framework I'd like to explain is the lotus flower, which is my theory. Here I've used Payne 2014's way of looking at theory, which is breaking it down into theory, practice models, and perspectives, because I feel this is how I work. Payne says theories are an overall explanation of the person in their environment, and theories assist with understanding why a problem is occurring and where an intervention should take place. The practice models are a blueprint of action or intervention working with a person, and it describes what happens in practice. And the perspective is a way of viewing the world from a value position. Here is an overall view of the theories, practice models, and perspectives that I currently have in my framework. This just gives you a little bit of an overview, but what I'll do is break these down for you. So systems, it encompasses the nature of the complex systems of a person's life. And it's about investigating all the systems that contribute to one's behaviour and welfare. So systems theory emphasises the relationship among individuals, groups, organisation and communities, and it focuses on the interrelationship between the systems, and it's best applied when there are several systems that are interconnecting. One of the systems that I will use is from Brenner's ecological system. I feel like I will use this in my practice because it will give me a holistic picture of the person within their environment. Another systems theory I have in my practice framework is family systems, and this is about understanding the role a person has within their family system and the system itself. So I'll use this in assessment to help me gain an understanding of how a family is functioning, whether they're balanced or dysfunctional, their organisation, their strengths and the problems. This theory is relevant to my social work practice because my value is families and I'd like to work with families. And I also understand that a person can't be understood in isolation of each other. It's about them within that family system. I also understand while this theory is a comprehensive theory working with families, the challenge is that it only focuses on the family, and this theory can't be used in every practice context. The next theory in my practice framework is a behavioural theory called social learning theory, and this states that behaviour is learnt from one's environment through the processes of observational learning. And this can be seen in the famous Bobo doll experiment, demonstrating that children observe other people and later copy that behaviour. Bandura believes that humans are an active information processor and that we actually think about the relationship between the behaviour and the consequences. So, if I become a social worker in a school setting or a youth worker, I would encounter bullying, violence, substance use, school attendance, mental health issues that are affecting the young person's socialisation. So, by applying social learning theory, I can assess the role models and stimuli a young person is exposed to and whether these are reinforcing negative behaviours or discouraging positive behaviours. So, the theory helps identify patterns of dysfunctional thoughts that influence emotion and behaviour. But one of the challenges of using this is it places more weight on how one setting can influence behaviour and it neglects the person's accountability for their behaviour and any developmental considerations. Attachment theory is the next theory, and this provides an explanation of how a child develops socially and emotionally based on their attachment to their primary caregiver and subsequently the relationships they have as an adult. And it is important to understanding relationships. There's 4 attachment styles. There's secure, insecure avoidant, insecure ambivalent, and disorganized. And he said that a person's interactions with others is guided by memory and expectations from their internal model, which influence and help evaluate their contact with others. So, attachment theory can be applied to children and adults, and it's relevant to social work practice as it helps us understand relationships and the behaviour that can result from different attachment styles. It can also be used to help understand a person's behaviour and identify areas of support. As a social worker, I will use this for assessment, intervention, and treatment. However, I am understanding that there is a limitation to attachment theory, and this is a failure to recognise the social influences of class, gender, culture, and ethnicity of one's personal development. Practice models is the next part of my framework, and one of the main ones that I do use is crisis intervention. A crisis is an event which leads a person to a temporary state of psychological disorganisation or inability to function. A crisis intervention is the immediate short-term intervention which focuses on returning a person to their previous levels of functioning after experiencing a crisis, and it also aims to minimise the long-term psychological trauma. It allows a person to lean on a social worker for a short amount of time, and there is Robert's 7-stage crisis intervention model. Crisis intervention is relevant to our social work practice as a crisis can happen to anyone, anytime, in any context setting. And it is important to understand the stages a person goes through when experiencing and resolving crisis. We need to also understand how to assess the situation, build rapport, offer services, offer support, and also help them learn from the crisis and how they can use that to cope with similar situations in the future. One of the challenges to crisis intervention is there's no one size fits all approach. Every crisis or situation is unique to the person, and challenges such as cultural, religion, a person's values or beliefs can create new crises if not handled professionally. Person-centered therapy is the next model in my practice framework, and Carl Rogers believes a human's basic motive is a tendency towards self-actualization, and that's to fulfill one's potential and achieve the highest level one can. So self-actualization occurs when a person's ideal self is congruent with their behaviour and their self-image. And Rogers also states that for a person to grow, they need an environment that provides them with genuineness, acceptance, and empathy. And without these, healthy personalities and relationships will not grow, much like a lotus flower without its water. Person-centered therapy is relevant to my role as a social worker because I'll be creating these environments, and I'll also be putting the person in a position where they are the expert of their own life. While I'll always do my best to put the person in a position where they are the expert in their life, I know this will be challenged at times. And as a social worker, I do need to uphold the values and responsibility of my ethical practice on my profession, and at times this will challenge the person-centered approach. Task-centered practice is in my framework, and this is recognised as a foundational social work practice that incorporates case management approaches. It is a goal-focused interpersonal change approach that recognises that social workers are an active part of that process, with the ultimate goal of empowering the person that you're working with. So in task-centered practice, social workers work on mutually agreed set of target problems, enabling the person that they're working with to design and carry out their own action plan. I've seen task-centered practice used within the hospital setting with discharge planning, mental health workers and youth workers using it as an action plan for their clients. And I've also seen family support workers working with families with complex needs, helping them break down their goals. There are challenges to working in task-centered practice. It is important that I'm enabling the person that I'm working with, that it's their plan and end goal, and working towards empowering them and not disempowering them. I also need to work within the confidentiality limits, and that's understanding what conditions information can be shared with others and other organisations, and how I'll be transparent with the person that I'm working with. Narrative therapy is also in my practice framework, and it is based on the idea that the narrative we all have actively shapes our experience, sense of self, and our life choices. Fuchs states that people can be constrained by harmful narratives that they've generated. Narrative therapy seeks to be respectful, a non-blaming approach that helps people identify their values, skills, and knowledge so they can effectively confront problems and make room for new stories. I've applied narrative therapy in counselling sessions. Narrative therapy requires a worker to be curious, open, and respectful towards separating the person from their problem. The approach holds on to social constructionalism, belief that there are no absolute truths. A challenge of the application of narrative therapy, however, is you do need time with the person that you're working with, and this cannot be used in all practice settings. Now that I've explained some of the main theories and models that I do use in my practice framework, I'd just like to show you a list of a few more that I do use. I just couldn't possibly fit them into the 20-minute presentation to be able to explain them in depth. The next part of my practice frameworks is perspectives, and perspectives is the way of viewing the world from a value position. Strengths-based approach is part of my framework, and it is a social work practice that emphasises on self-determination and strengths. It's a philosophical way of viewing a person as resourceful and resilient when faced with adversity. The practice focuses on the positive attributes of the person, and the practice is important towards aiding and recovering empowerment with people. It operates on the assumption that all people, even when faced with problems, have the strength and resources which they can draw upon to make positive changes. Strengths-based approach is relevant to social work as it's part of our core practice standards. So social workers, in partnership with people, facilitate empowerment, build strengths, enhance well-being, social inclusion, and promote community development. One of the changes of strengths-based is that we shouldn't totally neglect a person's weaknesses, because poorly managed weaknesses can influence the issue or problem a person is facing. And this can be seen in the context of substance use, as the use, if not addressed, will influence the issue and problem. Anti-oppressive practice is part of my critical framework under perspectives, and it's a critical social work approach that draws on critical social work theories, and it is informed by humanistic social justice values, taking into account the experience and views of oppressed people. It's based on the recognition of social origins of service users and seekers to transform power relations in practice. A key assumption of anti-oppressive practice is that social workers must recognise all forms of oppression as harmful, and anti-oppressive workers promote change to organisational structures and service delivery that serve to oppress and understand problems that are linked to social inequality. While working in a men's-only suicide prevention program, I've been able to apply this perspective, and applying anti-oppressive practice to the service has assisted me with inquiring into the Anti-Discrimination Act. So while there is a need for some gendered-based programs, there does need to be some evidence-based research behind it. So a challenge for me using any critical theory practice in my framework at the moment is that I feel like I am a person-centered person, that I look at the person in their situation as opposed to understanding a person in their situation from forms of oppression. The next part of my practice framework are the rocks that are in my pond that represents the skills that I bring to my practice. And I understand a fundamental part of my work is working with people and building strong relationships and engaging with individuals, families, groups, organisations, and communities towards positive outcomes for the person that I'm working with. The skills that I bring to my work as a social worker are equally as important as the sound theoretical knowledge I have, because without these skills, my work wouldn't be effective. My practice is about helping people, and we couldn't do this on theoretical knowledge alone. So, as a social worker, I understand that I'll wear many hats. I'll be advocating for people, I'll be a negotiator, a counsellor, an assessor, an administrator, a coordinator, and more. And I need a set of solid skills to be able to carry out all these roles. So, the list of my skills are interpersonal networking skills, interviewing skills, assessment, strengths based empowerment, negotiation, professional accountability and competence, emotional intelligence, critical reflection and reflective practice, organisational and documenting skills, observational skills, collaboration, conflict management, and time management. The skills are represented by the rocks in my pond, as they are a set of skills that I know I'm going to be heavily relying on, and they are my rocks to helping bring my theoretical knowledge into practice. So I'm very aware that my skills will be tested and challenged in practice, as people are unique and tricky, and I'll also have the pressure of working with a caseload and time management as well. The rocks in the pond also represent the knowledge that I bring to my practice, and as you would have seen at the start of my story, I have personal knowledge with grief and loss, trauma, mental health, addiction, and family systems. The professional knowledge that I bring to my practice is from my work experience, and I've worked at Lifeline, RACV, and I've been a life and fitness coach, which has helped build my sound interpersonal skills. The specialist knowledge that I bring to my practice is crisis support, safety planning, and counselling, where I completed half a Bachelor of Counselling before transferring over to social work. And the knowledge does add to my competency levels. However, I am aware I'm going to be challenged in practice, and this will be through triggers, and this is where the ground of my pond comes into play. The ground of my pond is what keeps me accountable and grounded to my professional practice, because without these, there would be no pond. The accountability is represented by the AASW Code of Ethics, Practice Standards, and Membership, and working within the boundaries of my professional practice. Throughout my presentation, I have given some examples of working within my professional codes, and I feel being an AASW accredited member will hold me accountable for my professional practice. I could also see that my personal values that I spoke at the beginning of resonate with the values of my professional practice, and this is what binds my pond water and my ground together. So to keep myself grounded, I will continue to check in with myself regularly and reflect on what the current context that I'm working in requires of me and what professional development courses I can do to assist building my knowledge. Because an important part of my ongoing learning is active learning. I also need to be accountable for myself professionally and personally, and this will require self awareness, checking in with my health, attending to triggers that may happen within my practice, and allocating time for self care and attending external supervision. Coming back to the theme of my framework and the delicate lotus flower that's been blooming throughout the presentation, the four elements, the murky water, the rock, the ground, and the lotus, are a whole system that work together to create one who performs their duty with a kind heart without attachment. I understand the work that I'll do is as delicate as a blooming lotus flower, and that I need to be constantly aware of the challenges of vicarious trauma and power that can impact the whole system. Vicarious trauma is a result of working and engaging with people and their traumatic experiences, and it's a form of countertransference that's stimulated by the exposure. Studies have shown combining psychological safety and wellness programs within the workspace will prevent burnout, vicarious trauma, and foster resilience. So keeping my pond healthy is about checking in with the environment that I'm working in and adapting some of these programs to my professional and personal life. The last challenge is power and understanding my position of power personally and professionally when working within the community. And I need to bring to my practice culture humility, opening my awareness to my own biases and perceptions, which is now a lifelong learning, self-reflection process of mine. I understand that my narrative and the condition of my pond will change as my experience continues to grow. Thank you for listening to my practice framework, and I wish you all the best for your future practices.